Welcome to Unfiltered with Matt. That's me. In today's video, we're going to talk about anti-woke, and I have my own opinion. I imagine as you who are watching also have opinions about this topic as well. Now, I knew that this was going to be a topic that is going to probably ignite anger and probably can elicit some opinions, but I kind of sat back and not really had any comments about it. And I just felt the need to kind of express my view because it's really, in my opinion, hurting lots of people and really distracting from what politicians should be doing, which is actually creating policies and working on legislation that should be helping the American people. And instead, what's the lesser kind of path of resistance for politicians is to kind of jump in this narrative where you can attack those who are the most vulnerable and create these narratives that there's an agenda to go after children and that you're being replaced, the great replacement theory that they kind of talk about. And it leads to this kind of anti woke movement. And I thought that the first area that I kind of wanted to start here in talking about this was my theory of where this kind of started or was the catalyst towards this starting. And it makes me want to go back to when Barack Obama was elected. Now, when he was elected, I felt kind of relief that there was proof that, the American dream uh, could be achieved by all. Because here you had our first black president. And I was really hopeful that we've kind of moved past what we saw and learned in schools that, that we've reached a new level of getting past racism. And early videos that I kind of watched on the internet about people being interviewed on the street, like in the 80s, they were like, talking about, you know, the clash between whites and blacks at the time. And it seemed positive from people who were interviewed, but of course they're interviewed in New York City, which is very diverse, population. But they kind of said, doesn't matter to me, we're all people. So how do we get from there to here? And I think that when Obama was elected, a lot of people who didn't feel threatened as far as their position and power in this country felt all of a sudden that, oh, there is a real threat of, that I'm going to lose my job to other people, minorities. And it just created this kind of catalyst from there. Um, I was looking at, you know, kind of online, that what was going on in the really the articles and the headlines. And here we have how Obama's election sparked the white racial panic that's powering Trump. And this is towards the area of where Trump was coming into the spotlight into the election, and Obama was about to end his second term. Now, let's not also forget at this time that Trump himself was questioning that if Obama was a naturalized United States citizen because he was asking for his birth certificate. So, all kind of crazy things happening right there, and kind of unprecedented for any other president. And it just so happened that this is all directed towards our first black president. And a lot of people at the time were kind of using the guise of like, listen, I have no issue. I'm just questioning this. And you're like, yeah, but why are you questioning this person? So it was, for me, it was the start of the downward trajectory for United States. Now, I'm just going to say this, just in case anybody didn't know, you know, I think that there are and always have been pockets where certain minorities and individuals are not safe in certain communities in America. I'll just use that, for example, I'm Hispanic and I'm also happen to be gay. And I know that even in, parts of upstate New York, that I have been in situations that were less safe for me and I know certain areas to avoid because of it. And all those people who say like, "Hey, that does not happen," and all those things. I think that maybe you're fortunate or you're in denial. Um, but it was something that I was like, okay, you know what? I saw in the United States that we were headed towards this positive trajectory. It was hopefully going to infiltrate these kind of smaller communities where people really do feel afraid to come out or even be themselves. And that is something that I was hoping would change. But, you know, things happened. So it kind of brings me into, at the time, what was kind of also contributing towards this buildup of anti woke. And there was a lot of discussions with cancel culture that was happening at the time. And with social media, it became very easy for individuals to be, let's say, keyboard, let's say, I don't even know the word for it right now, but they became very comfortable behind the keyboard warriors, to be able to say things about people that they didn't like. Um, and this was impacting not only, let's say, individuals who were considered liberal, but also those who were conservative. I think a good example of that in the entertainment industry is Roseanne, right? Um, who got canceled over things that she did say that were rather questionable and racist. And then you had individuals like Ellen DeGeneres, who I would say leans towards more the liberal side, and she was someone who is a lesbian, and there was questions about the workplace kind of environment under Ellen, and that really led to lots of celebrities and other individuals kind of speaking out that Ellen was not the nicest person. But you also saw lots of other individuals in the news, and at this time you had Bill O'Reilly and other people coming under scrutiny and really getting canceled. Now, I will say this, I do think that people deserve the right to be able to learn and grow from their mistakes. Many of the things that, even as I go through life, that has made me kind of more an expert in my field or wherever I do, it's because I was able to have the experience of making a mistake and then learning from it. Now, some of these individuals, right, have had huge mistakes, but us as humans, hopefully, we do learn from them and grow from them. So, in some instances, that someone makes a mistake and then realizes maybe the error, or adjust uh, their ways, I think that that is something that should be allowed. I also think that people should be able to freely ask questions and talk about things, because I think that in some ways, how can someone grow if we're not willing to have the conversations? I have had conversations with people who are not, LGBTQ forward, or not think certain things about gay people, and I've heard them. Um, I've had people who have struggles with their children coming out to them, and for me, my position in that has always been that it took me lots of years to accept myself. So naturally, for those who I care about in my life, I knew that it would take them time and it would be unfair of me not to give them that opportunity. So I think that a lot of people are getting really upset with the cancel culture and seeing how angry people were getting about what things people said or were talking about. And this was kind of leading towards this anti woke movement, because you couldn't really, in lots of people's view, talk about anything without being fearful that you could be canceled, right? So that's so far my theory of definitely how this started. So I first want to go into what I think is important, defining woke. So woke is political slang, and well, they refer to it, but it's really about being aware of racial injustice and discrimination. And that recently then changed, where it encompassed a broader aspect and understanding, where individuals were aware of social injustice such as including race, sexism, and denial of LGBTQ rights. Now, other words that can be associated with wokeness or being woke are to be aware, to be conscious, evolved, inclusive, and politically correct. Now, there's no words there that jump out to me, but I think that a lot of people do unfortunately jump out to political correctness because I think a lot of people have problems with, let's say, being told what they should say or how they should act. It's interesting to me because when we're kids, in school, you're told, let's say, little Matthew is told, and I haven't been told this, by the way. They're like, Matthew, you can't call Mary a fat, ugly biatch. And I was like, why? They're like, well, that's not nice. And then as an adult, all those rules and things that were taught about how to treat Mary go out the door. And as an adult, I'm calling Mary a fat, ugly biatch. So, you know, I think that there's kind of areas that we should, as adults, kind of respect with each other. Um, and I think that no other person has done this really well in navigating this other than, let's say, I think of Dolly Parton, who has, been able to speak her mind, but does so in such a kind and non threatening way that it's hard for anybody really to hate Dolly. And she is someone who I see as an ally of the LGBTQ community, but also can be broadly appeal to individuals who are on the conservative and liberal side. So I think there's ways to do this, and ways that we all can do this. I think about my neighbors and other people in my community, and some of them are conservative, some of them do support Trump, and I try to come with their understanding. I think we're all in the same boat. We have very different views of how to approach this. I have very specific views on what I think about Trump, and my concerns really go about from the area of I don't think that a politician should be idolized, like a celebrity. Like there shouldn't be merchandise for, a politician in the sense of like, and where I was, I saw Trump stores kind of coming up about, and that kind of really disgusted me because I kind of was like, this is no longer about policies and belief. This is about a person. And I feel in politics, we should be a little above that. Um, but again, moving forward. So it's then when we start to see articles and kind of headlines coming about. And most recently, I just want to post this here, that Texas hopes to start its own anti woke stock exchange to take on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ. And when I hear woke used by other individuals outside of the definition it's been given, it's usually targeting those who are minorities. And I feel like it's a way to kind of avoid getting into a heated discussion where you're kind of saying, I don't like gay people. I don't want to see gay people on TV. I don't want to see them in my workplace. I don't want to see them kind of throwing themselves in front of me and trying to throw their lifestyle in front of me. And I think that everyone's just trying to live their life. But so when I see like, what are you talking about, Texas, as an anti woke stock exchange? You mean this is going to be no gay people allowed in these stocks, no black people allowed in these stocks, no minorities, no Hispanics, no other races allowed, or Hispanics or ethnicities allowed in this. So I was like, okay, that's kind of crazy. And of course, then you also have, Florida with their kind of Stop Woke Act, which is to ban instruction in schools or mandatory training in workplaces that suggest a person is privileged or oppressed because of their race, sex, or national origin. And this is really where Florida, kind of really focuses on the instructions in the workplace. As far as businesses that have kind of been attacked by this anti-woke movement, which is Target, because they, in June, and this has been going on for over a decade, have had Pride merchandise. And It just so happened that the opportunity and what has been pushed, by politicians to create division is that gay people are trying to groom your children. Um, and as a kid, I always knew there was something different about me. Um, I do think that maybe, talking about sexuality at a young age was there's a certain age for it because I am very happy I held on to my youth for a very long time and my innocence. But I find it interesting in this picture that the woman on the far left, for me, when I'm looking at the screen, is looking at her phone as holding up the sign. She seems very devoted to her cause, and protecting the children. So, Target has not had a good kind of experience with recovering from this. And what I find so funny is that companies like Amazon and Walmart have also sell, yes, can't even talk, sell these same products as Target, but yet have been targeted the same way that Target has. Really crazy stuff. Everyone's getting really angry, and at the same time, everyone's going, these snowflakes are going to be really upset about these things. And what's interesting is that, a lot of people equated, individuals crying about like certain policy changes and things like this as being snowflakes, but overreacting and let's say or instantly reacting in an angry manner is also sensitive as well. And I would say it also categorizes as potentially their term as snowflake. So you had lots of anti-woke movement as well, moving against corporations, and namely, you have Disney, that was being targeted. And this is where I found things to be really interesting and really apparent of what at least I see as the anti-woke movement. And when they say, hey, Disney has gone woke, and whenever you ask somebody to kind of define this, they go, oh, you're putting me in a position, this is really hard, I can't really define it. And I hate to try to define it for them, but I will try. Um, but really, what I saw amongst this when they were talking about anti woke was that, hey, here's Little Mermaid being released, and there's an actress of color playing the main character, and that's making me upset. And I was like, well, isn't that kind of racist what you're kind of saying? Or they're seeing lots of programs, which sometimes are original content, having people of color or LGBTQ characters in them, and they're kind of saying, no, it's not that I'm homophobic, it's not that I'm racist, I'm just tired of this woke stuff. And you're like, well, how about this other show? Oh, I'm okay with that. And I go, isn't that interesting? There's only people of non-color or non-ethnic and straight in there, and you don't have any problem with that. So, very interesting. I don't see anybody having controversy over Yellowstone. So, so, I mean, by the way, I do enjoy that show. I mean, it is a good show. Not for everybody, but I do enjoy it. Just to illustrate how far and crazy, the woke movement has gotten, you also have, let me see, articles here where Republicans were thinking that the Xbox was going really woke. And I was like, whoa, this is like really crazy, that, they're focusing on the Xbox because Xbox introduced an energy saving mode, they're turning your children into climate activists at an early age and brainwashing them. So this is like really crazy, and I'm not sure about anybody else, but you want to kind of save electricity and don't want to pay high costs. So now me saving money is a problem and I was also considered woke. And that's where I try to look back and say, let me try to define what they're saying. And I think what people who are, targeting Disney and all these other corporations and saying they're woke is that you're creating division where there wasn't one. You're creating a problem where there wasn't one. You're dividing people and putting these, what they call identity politics, right? in the forefront, and it's really hurting a lot of people instead of, really focusing on the main issues. So the problem with that, I think, in regards to, hey, you're creating division where there isn't one. I'll take like Target as an example. So Target has always had, I mean, for a decade or more, LGBTQ merchandise in June because it's Pride Month. But all of a sudden now you have a problem with that. So, and I hate to say it, there's always been minorities in TV. It's just now you're seeing them a little bit more, which, if you look at all the films and everything that's been released, which is still nowhere near as much as they are in the population. Now, just give an example because a lot of people always use, well, this should represent the population, and seeing lots of characters of color and ethnicities in these programs and who are LGBTQ really doesn't represent the makeup of America. And that's the problem we have. We're seeing an uneven distribution of things. So Hispanics and as an ethnicity are becoming a large population in the United States. So technically I should be seeing a lot more programming with Hispanic centric characters and storylines. But that's not happening. And I think it's also hard that the Hispanic community is really hard to categorize. There's many different beliefs in the community, um, different many makeups. You have individuals of Cuban heritage, Dominican, Puerto Rican, uh, many others, and it's really hard to categorize. You have individuals who are very religious. You have individuals who come from a communist country into the United States. Puerto Rico is part of the United States, and that's, my parents are both Puerto Rican, which makes me Puerto Rican as well. But it's very interesting in that regard to see how people kind of talk about this and try to push their position. So you've seen companies like kind of talk about DE&I and going after it, and a lot of people say, hey, this is just the corporations trying to save face, introduce this as a diversity initiative, and it could be true. Hey, it all depends on how these things are used. And I have gone through the training in the way that I think that it's kind of presented, and I always think, yes, there's always room for improvement, right? Is that we learn about other individuals, and I can enroll as a Hispanic into, let's say, conversations about Hispanics and Latinos in this space. And I also can enroll into LGBTQ group. I have participated in discussions with disabled individuals. And you kind of learn, and what you're kind of learning here is, the subconscious bias that we maybe potentially have. Like, for example, and I'll throw some easy ones out here just to make it very digestible for everybody, is that if I'm interviewing, let's say, for a position, and someone is older or disabled, that I am not going to automatically discredit them, even if I have or have not reviewed their credentials prior to really assessing their capabilities. So I shouldn't assume just because somebody is older and applying for, let's say, a tech position, that, hey, they don't have the skills that I'm going to need for this job. Only young people have the skills because they're more experienced in, let's say, technology and keeping up with new technology. Now, this older person could have just recently come from Apple and had many years of experience and develops their own software and is a much better candidate than maybe some of the other individuals. But subconsciously, I'm making a decision because of my unconscious bias, right? That this person's older and automatically is not going to have the experience I'm looking for. In regards to someone who's disabled, right? I'm going to make the subconscious decision that, oh, you know what? I don't think this person's right for the position because they're just not going to have the skill sets I'm looking for because they have a disability. Well, that's incorrect, right? Just because someone requires an accommodation to potentially do a job doesn't mean that they can't do the job well. and they may have ideas to improve or add new insight to a product or service that you are doing. I also think that if you are a company in public service, what is really good is to have your workforce represent those individuals. I think of, for example, this when I were to go to a hospital and for my parents, and specifically, let's say my father, to have somebody else who is maybe a nurse or doctor who does speak Spanish is very helpful. And maybe if even if they're, let's say, Hispanic and Latino in background, it's also something that helps, ease a patient as well. So I think it's very important to kind of go past this, and that's the main concept of DE&I with diversity, equity, inclusion. And I think that it's been kind of weaponized when you see headlines saying, "Hey, this school hired this black superintendent, and she was terrible at her job and abused the system." Well, I think that there's a mentality amongst minorities and sometimes even in the Hispanic community, which I can speak to, is that you feel like you are representing the entire community. And it's almost like saying, you know what, there can't be a person who is black and bad at their job. There can't be a person who's gay and bad at their job. Because guess what? That's just proof that you're all bad at your job. Well, that's kind of BS. And they use these one off and examples to kind of illustrate that, see, this doesn't work. See, what happens when you hire minorities? And that's completely illogical because you can look at the opposite side and say, let's take a look at your current workforce, which is not, let's say, diverse. Um, and there's bad workers there. Am I going to say that all individuals who are not of minorities are bad workers? No. It's all based on our background, and I think we have to get past that. I use these programs to also self reflect. Like how can I improve not only for individuals for minorities, but just the workforce in general, because there are many other things that come to mind that kind of separate us. Where someone grew up, right? Their social economic background. My family didn't have a lot of money, and I think that that's something that many people can relate to, right? But we potentially are judged for it. When you're in groups and conversations, I've hung out with people who have lots of money, and I've met people who are very, even though they have money, are very easy to talk to. I have met people who have money and automatically said, "You don't belong here. What are you doing here?" So, very interesting in that regard. And it's so interesting how these programs, and when you talk about diversity is now a bad word. And it completely goes against what I was raised is, you know, that diversity is not bad. You know, I like learning about new people and other cultures. I like exploring our similarities and seeing some other individuals' perspective. And it helps me self reflect on myself and how I can maybe be a better person. So, the other thing that we kind of have is in regards to critical race theory. And I first want to define it. So, critical race theory. So, basically, the core idea is that race is a social construct, and that racism is not just merely a product of an individual's bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in the legal system and policies. And I think a lot of people, what they're saying with the anti woke movement is that, hey, you're creating division where there isn't one. And really, you look at critical race theory, it's saying, hey, the core principles is that race is a social construct. It's not something that is natural, right? It's a product of bias and prejudice. Created through the legal system and policies. A lot of people really tack this and say, hey, the kids are being taught this. And it's like, well, this is not something taught to elementary or let's say even high schoolers potentially, because something taught in law, right? And it really is talking about how policies can be built to and have in the past been built to kind of target and specifically hold back individuals who are black and other minorities. And I think a good example of that is, let's say, once slavery was abolished, one thing that they did was pass a law that basically, no, you know what, we're going to have to do a literacy test now in order for you to qualify to vote. Well, guess what? Most people who are slaves were not allowed to be taught anything or even learn. So there's a high likelihood that this new population who was just released from slavery is not going to be able to vote. And this is what we're talking about, those strategic things that are being done as a sneaky way to say, oh, we're not targeting people, almost like the anti-woke, like saying, oh, no, no, I'm not racist or anything, you know, I'm not anti-homophobic or anything. And I'm not saying, again, I just want to add a disclaimer here. I'm not saying everybody who believes this. I do think that they're thinking like, hey, they're creating division. I don't recall there being such division. And I think it's these individuals adding fuel to this fire. There, critical race theory has been taught for quite some time. And again, just like the Pride merchandise at Target, it just so happens that now they can take these things, add kind of fuel to the fire, create something that doesn't exist there, and distract from us. That, hey, I guess what? I created a problem. I'm going to fix it for you. Well, there never was a problem. Um, I think we have to deal with our internalized issues and fear. And I think a lot of it does come from fear. You know, so just thinking about critical race theory, you think about the Electoral College, right? That the whole reason that system was set up is because slaves were not considered a whole person. So kind of crazy, uh, to think about that. If you want to pull policies from today and think about why critical race theory and being taught about the past is important and applying it to the future, is that you have lots of states, trying to introduce laws that seemingly to some people are innocent but are not, and are meant to oppress certain populations, individuals from being able to vote. Because let's say they are going to probably vote more democratic. And a good example of that is like, say, hey, we're not going to allow people to vote on weekends. Well, let's say in that community, most people who are Hispanic are lower income and having to work on weekends. Let's say, well, now I'm going to introduce another policy because I just realized that it's not impacting enough of those individuals to prevent them from voting. And I realize that they still can request time off of work legally to be able to vote. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to close the voting locations and in their area. And what I'm going to do is tell them, hey, in your county, you still have voting locations. Well, lots of these areas are going to be a little more urban. These people are not going to have transportation to actually vote. And now that is preventing a whole population from being able to vote in their community, and then pushing up your ability of your candidate to be able to vote, because the poverty in that area is mainly impacting Black and Hispanics. And those who are not Black and Hispanics are able to vote, and just so happen to statistically be more leaning towards the Republican side. Excuse me while I wipe my nose. Allergies. Okay. So, I think it's also important to kind of take a look at why I believe this is a distraction. Uh, my theory is that when you kind of have politicians focusing on these things, that they're kind of able to not do what really is going to benefit workers. And it all comes down to money. So if you're introducing policies that are really hurting your bottom line when you're getting donations from these big corporations, or you own a company that potentially will need to pay higher wages, well, I don't want to do that. I want to create the narrative that, also companies are suffering and inflation is caused because really, all these wage increases. Well, why are CEOs making so much more money than before? And why are there record profits and good areas like gas and oil companies making record profits? Meanwhile, gas is going up. Well, apparently there must be room for you to make lots of profits and you're not struggling as much as you said. Recently, Elon Musk was just approved for 59 billion pay package as a CEO of Tesla, I believe it is. That's kind of crazy, right? That some one person can get that much money, and it just so happens that Elon Musk has very large problems with, increasing wages. So the minimum wage. So very interesting here. So let's take a look at the first study. And I found this interesting. I'm going to shrink myself because I'm kind of covering up things. Let me move. Maybe what I'm going to do is also hide myself. Let me hide myself. I'm hiding my little picture. Okay. Let's take a look at this here. So what this chart is indicating, and this is a study that has gone from 1959 all the way to 2021, and it indicates poverty levels by race in the United States. And as you can see that individuals in black are in gray are black, individuals who are marked in red are Hispanic, and it could be any race, that's their ethnicity. You in yellow you see American Indian and Alaskan Native, and in green we have Asian. In blue you have all the races represented, so it show you the average between all the races. And in our black we have white non-Hispanics. So you definitely could see a huge contrast based on ethnicity and also someone's race, that they are higher poverty than our white non-Hispanics. So we kind of talk about like, hey, we're creating a problem when there isn't one by kind of creating D&I initiatives, having individuals of color and Hispanics be given roles and be more visible in LGBTQ, right? Be more visible in media and get these jobs. Really, you could see there's a long ways to go. I mean, yes, you could see in this chart saying there's improvement for Black Americans here, and that's great, but it's still nowhere near the average here. So definitely, there's lots of areas that still are not having the same benefits and opportunities or ability to achieve the same financial stability as other groups. And this is why I say it's a distraction, because, okay, I have data here that says there is a problem, but now we're creating the narrative that there isn't a problem and that we're creating something out of nothing. That makes me upset. So I wanted to take a look at this lovely chart here. And this is basically showing countries who are enrolled into the economic kind of determination. Now, these are only countries that enroll in this to be able to assess their poverty levels. And at the bottom of the list is Costa Rica at 21%. Now, second from the bottom, unfortunately, and probably shocking for individuals, is going to be the United States. So 18% of the United States population are living below the poverty line. And this is a country which is very rich, right? And you have millionaires and billionaires. And as many of you know, 1% of the population contains 90% of the wealth in the United States. So it makes kind of sense why we have something like this. Now, there's other countries, yes, that are close to the United States. We have Mexico at 6.6. You have Israel at 16.9. But still, like, you're like, wow, the United States is beating them in poverty levels? That's kind of crazy. So, again, just something else to kind of support that. I think that a lot of this is distracting from where we really should be focusing, is like, how do we improve this? How do we stop this kind of area of individuals struggling in the poverty line? I mean, there's a narrative that, hey, it's because, all these social programs being introduced. But if you look there, lots of the countries which are considered, have social programs such as, universal health care, have nowhere near poverty levels that United States has. Really crazy. And all this seems very depressing, right? So I want to leave off on a positive note because I believe this was from Framework uh, Industries, and I correct me if I'm wrong or look it up, right? So this study where they actually took individuals just randomly and they said, I'm going to introduce and present to you in front of you um, fake legislation, which actually takes key components of real legislation passed and or proposed in many states. And what is in this legislation is a ban on systemic racism teaching in K through 12, basically slave discussion around slavery and the history that the United States has had with that. The prevention of transgender youth and participating in sports that match their gender but not their sex. And then also preventing schools from being used to support diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at the public level, such as universities. Now, the participants were given the framework that the core principles that they wanted to kind of evaluate were the principles of freedom, honesty, and integrity. And along with that, they gave them the definition of woke, which we previously discussed, which is being aware of social injustice. After that, the participants came back and presented their conclusion after reviewing all of these things. And one of the areas, this is just one of the quotes, and I probably should move it so we can actually see it, right? Is the individual had one of the individuals who participated had been quoted as saying, freedom is essential to our society. We all need to be free to be ourselves and to speak our minds. That means being able to have open conversations about race in our society and being free to live as ourselves. This legislation, for some reason I always slur when I say legislation, would violate this freedom to speak our minds and to be ourselves. A second participant indicated this bill contradicts the exact foundation of our country. People came here from other lands to seek freedom, just to seek freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, and again, that's stated in the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. Also, freedom does not supersede someone else's freedom. So, your choice to live your life and make your choices in your life has no bearing on someone else's choices. And I think that is very hopeful because, like I said in the very beginning, when you kind of take people out of this, and when I interact with my neighbors and are really able to see that we're all human beings and we all kind of the same things, that we all have a job to do, we're all trying to support our families and our own lives, that at the end of the day, we are all focused on the same things. And when we come to that understanding, I think that we really can focus together on moving past what they call, this identity politics. I think that we need to stop and move away from really looking at labels that we put on ourselves, which is, Republican, Democrat, and really try to work together to solve issues so we all can partake and have a piece of the American dream. Then it's not just individuals creating this narrative for us that are advising us that, hey, that person got a little piece of the pie. Well, guess what? 90% of the pie is taken by the wealthy. And you're leaving us to fight over scraps and being angry that that person just so happened to get a job and I should be happy for them. But nobody's talking in outrage that, Elon Musk has just got a 59 billion pay package. I mean, that's the American dream, right? But at what cost for others? I believe, in a capitalist society such as the United States, that yes, you can achieve success by those means, by, making money and having a business. but I think we have to be careful about not sacrificing our morality through that, and not letting ourselves go into be overtaken by greed. And this study gives me hope that deep down, people really do care and are conditioned naturally, right, outside of the environment to really do the right thing. So let me know your thoughts. That was a long video, right? A lot of me ranting and raving. I hope that I didn't offend any of you. Hopefully, we can have an educated discussion around this. What are your thoughts? I hope that you're all safe and well, and I hope that you're all doing well. And I really empathize with any struggles that you're going through, and hopefully, we all can unite together and really get these politicians to really do what really matters for us, not focus on dividing the American people. They should be working on uniting the American people and helping us. So, thank you. Subscribe. And if you like content like this, leave a comment, hit the thumbs up. And until next time, stay safe. Bye.